Memoirs of the New Henry, a narrative by Robert James Yates. Memoirs of the New Henry is the story of a man who read the brochure Look, I'm Making All Things New, and then began to believe in the Paradise Hope. So vivid was that hope, he had a dream 2 weeks before his death about his concept of the New Order. But concept and reality don't always agree. Henry learns this when he really dies and enters the New Order. We learn that our concepts of the New Order are guaranteed to be entirely different from the reality we soon experience. But more than that, the ideas of who is resurrected, what the new language is, and so on, can only be pure conjecture. However, this is a positive story. In both ideas of the New Order, the only constants are the prophecies that will come true. Meeting, service, and study are very much emphasized. The story is faith-strengthening and encouraging. It should build in us a clearer picture of our future. Memoirs of the New Henry, Chapter 1, The Dream. Kinder words were never spoken. I will help you, sir. At first, my nudity was not obvious, nor my posture. The person standing over me was both smiling and crying. This I didn't understand. I sat up, and 20 persons or more stood around me and were applauding. The next time I would see this woman who was weeping with glee, she would have clothing in her hands. Still stunned from the feeling of the moment, I viewed the sky all around me. It was still as blue as I remembered it. The sun beamed down a pleasant warmth, but then I stood up and immediately noticed there were no familiars. But wait, I was standing. I couldn't do that last I recalled. The wheelchair I was confined to was no longer beside me, and I was dressing myself. Not so amazing to be sure, but I could not even do that simple task only moments of memory ago. Once dressed, they led me to a chalet where inside was a meal already prepared. Forgive me, for I was still looking for familiars, a car, a radio, a newspaper. These things did I use to keep me abreast of the day and time. There were no clocks in the chalet, just loving friends. There were people I did not know. The woman who gave me my clothes called herself Helene. She was an inch taller than me, not saying much since I'm only 5'1". She sat across from me at the table. She put her utensils down a moment. What is your name? I am Henry. Well, Henry, do you know how you got here? Her words were no sooner spoken than a man sitting next to her gave her a look that paused her. I am curious beyond normalcy, I said. Helene presumed eating for a moment. The man whose expression stopped Helene then looked at me and spoke. Well, of course you are. Then he resumed eating. This I felt was odd behavior. Indeed, had the woman said something wrong? She was only inviting conversation. Not knowing whether it was wrong to have spoken up at all, I kept my place. But as I ate, many things were noticeable. For one thing, there was no meat on my plate. There was bread, fruit, vegetables, and even a sweet cake for dessert. There were dairy products, and even like cheese, milk, and butter. At the table were no aged persons like myself. Ah, yes, that much hadn't changed from the last time I had looked in the mirror. I looked 78 still. And not one of these people at the table could have possibly been older than 23. Then I noticed I was feeding myself. The persons at the nursing home called me a feeder. And when Cecile would come to feed me, my food was always tepid. Except for the coffee. I always got it hot. I wondered who Cecile was feeding now that I was sprung from that wretched place. But who sprung me? After dinner, the people all went into the living room and sat down. The man whose stare caused pause stood up. I knew that he was speaking only to me, for his stare was directly on me. My name is George. Henry, you are the first of the resurrected in our area. Resurrected? You mean I died? I cried out. My heart began racing for all that was in it. I could feel the blood rushing to my head. I began to cry loudly over this reality. Helene, who was sitting about 2 feet away, came over and put her arms around me. George continued, there is much to learn and much to do. No doubt you will want to know about your family, friends, and neighbors. It is sufficient to say that they too may be resurrected if the Lord wishes. Don't be afraid to ask any of us for help with anything, but much of your questions will be answered 2 days from now at General Assembly. But we will try to answer a few now if you have any. Where is this place? I asked. You are located in what used to be Cincinnati, Ohio. Where in Cincinnati, Ohio, I couldn't tell you. At least I'm home. You're from Cincinnati? Yes, sir. Good. But where are the cars and the buildings? Gone. How? That takes a bit of explaining. The world as you know it is gone. Does the word Armageddon have meaning for you? You mean nuclear holocaust? That's what most people thought it was, when in fact that was not what happened. God need not destroy the planet or life on it, only those who were ruining it. How long ago? Exactly 400 years, 2 months, and 12 days ago. Did anyone live through it? Sir, you are looking at a room full of survivors. Stunned as I was, I caught the implications. The people around me weren't 23 years old at all. They were all over 400 years old. But that can't be. No one lives that long. He read into my face my astonishment, almost disbelief. He motioned for someone to go to me, for Helene had returned to her seat. A man came over to me and put his arm around me. You made it, old man, he spoke consolingly. Old man? You're older than I am. We all got a good laugh out of that one. Then they realized that I caught the sense of what was being said. So I took the moment to summarize. I'm still on Earth. It's 400 years after world cataclysm, and I'm back from the dead, right? George said, right. For now, let's leave it at that. Oddly enough, I didn't feel much like asking for more information, except my last name is Hellman, Henry Hellman. Does that name ring a bell? Did anyone named Hellman survive Armageddon? Another man spoke up and said, Adele Hellman. She lives about 5 miles from here. Adele. No, I don't know that name. Let's see on Assembly Day. Maybe there are others, George said. That night I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. To be truthful, I was afraid I might die again, but not wake up. I wasn't sure how much of all of this to trust. I was grieving, too, for the loved ones I might never see again. The next day, George sent for Adele. To him, it was a long shot. Maybe she was related in some way I didn't know. I looked upon her with all curiousness. Of course, I hugged her just the same. The whole conversation reeked of awkwardness. She wanted to probe my memory without being too personal, and I was not comfortable telling her too much either. We spent the time posturing. When all was said and done, we both concluded that at best we were shoestring cousins. Still, it was kind of her to try, and kind of George to help. The moment of disconcertedness passed. I spent the rest of that day observing. After a while, I knew where I was. In fact, I walked to the Ohio River and looked back up the knoll. It was Price Hill, all right, and the chalet I was visiting was situated on the site of Mount Echo Park's highest lookout point. The river, which in my day could not be fished in because of the pollution, now is a brilliant crystal blue. So you'll pardon me if I made a fishing pole and plunked a line in the drink. Fortunately, someone happened along to correct my course of action. What was wrong with fishing? Apparently God had decreed that animal life no longer provided food for man's consumption. What about for the sport of it? Well, that was considered tormenting the little creatures. For me, I must confess, this made paradise a little less enjoyable. As a boy, I would while away the hours talking to God in silent repose and catch a few live ones. Some I even threw back. I never considered that I was hurting anything. Still, I could not deny that I was in paradise, so I let the fish alone. Who was I to mess with what God has wrought? So I sat there a moment, drinking up the air, soaking up the sun, feeling renewed. So I gazed upstream, and look! A dear, a beautiful doe was standing at the bank, her fawn suckling beneath her. I went up to her, and she did not run. As a matter of fact, a doe would have tried to buck me or dart for brush to protect her young in my day. But she just stood there. And I walked up to her and petted her and her fawn. The doe even licked my hand. But what made this moment so incredible is that only a few yards away were coyotes, and they posed her no threat. I didn't even know coyotes lived in Ohio, much less peaceful ones. I walked along the bank and noticed a little boy playing with a bear cub. It turns out the man who stopped me from fishing was the boy's father, so I walked up to the boy and rubbed the cub's tummy. The little boy didn't receive me well. He went off crying to his father. The man returned with his son and apologized for the boy's behavior. You have to understand, sir, he'd never seen an aged-looking person before. Your appearance gave him quite a shock. The man made the boy shake hands with me. I took the liberty to say, Son, I hope to look as young as your father someday. The tyke, still too young to understand, just hugged his father all the tighter. As it turned out, the man's name was William Hawthorne. His son's name was Philip, and I would become good friends with them and his wife Rebecca and their 15 other children. Assembly day had come. There were about 100 in our group. We sat in an outside amphitheater. The program began with a prayer. The prayer was interesting in that its presentation wasn't pompous or arrogant, nor was it a read prayer, nor was it a practiced prayer. Then the program turned to a kind of Bible discussion, but they were using a manuscript like no Bible I ever saw. Each person in the audience, down to little Philip, had a copy of it. In the middle of it were songs, one of which they sang at the outset. Then they gave way to a symposium of some kind. My vagueness is not deliberate, for it is difficult to comprehend all that was said. A person to my left tried to help me follow along from his manual, but I tired quickly of it. By midday, I was dragging along, drowsing at some points. It was hard to listen to. Helene came to eat lunch with me. She looked at me and could see how bloodshot my eyes were. It is difficult for you, isn't it, Henry? It is, ma'am. I don't understand a thing. It is almost as if they're speaking a foreign language. Well, in a way it is. If you were not an avid student of the Bible, much of its vernacular would be hard. But I know the Bible. Well, there's the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Christ died on the cross. There are the unknown tongue and hell, fire, and purgatory. Those are old world ideas. None of those ideas survived Armageddon. Those who clung to such ideas did not live to see what you are seeing. But I am alive. God didn't wipe them from my memory. Surely he would have done that if he didn't want me to remember them. But has it occurred to you that you may need to tear down those ideas yourself? That God wants you to do that? I guess. Think about it this way. God didn't raise you up with a young body, but you will get younger. The same is true of your understanding. With knowledge comes conformity. Your body and your mind will be transformed, just as you wouldn't hold on to that old body. Don't be too stubborn and hold on to old ideas. Just as you wouldn't get used to a young body right away, it will take time to get used to new ideas. So that's why I came back old. It will take time to redevelop. That afternoon, I listened with renewed determination to adopt the ideas I heard, even if I didn't understand them. I learned that the Earth's mineral supplies were now in harmony, that God had restored much of what mankind had wasted. Apparently, we had to rethink our technology that could be harmful. Principal application went far beyond the knowledge I formerly had. After all, men knew internal combustion engines released poisonous gases into the atmosphere, but no one stopped them from making such things. Now, not so much as a tool could be made without the method of its making being carefully scrutinized. To be honest, I like that. But we weren't back in the Stone Age either. 400 years after the old world ended, we were developing all forms of agriculture and practical science in ways I never could have imagined. Well, I arrived back to my host's house, and we talked for a while. George wanted to find out what I had learned. In all due honesty, I said, I realize I have a long way to go. Now that I will live forever, I have to make the right adjustments. Oh, you've resolved in your heart that you've been rewarded with everlasting life, have you? There was that look again. I knew I did it again, I admit it. I thought so. I hate to tell you this, but you were resurrected to get a second chance to live up to all of God's standards. You must not assume anything. Whether you live forever will depend on obedience. Or what? Or you will die and not come back. Not to everlasting torment. No, non-existence. Well, how long do I have to get it right? You are 400 years into Christ's 1,000-year reign. In the next 600 years, you will need to learn the laws and principles that apply to all of mankind and learn how to work within those regulations. During these next 6 centuries, you can fail, in which you could go out of existence, but only if you deliberately go against these commandments. But once this time is over, Christ gives his kingdom back to his Father. In that day, Jehovah will let the devil loose to test mankind one last time. We do not know how long Satan and his angels will be given before they are destroyed out of existence, but we all will be granted everlasting life after their destruction. You mean Satan is still alive? Yes, but where he cannot do us any harm now. But once people see this paradise, won't they do what they're told? Why would anyone want to spoil that? Now I know why Jehovah let you be part of the first ones in our area that were resurrected. Why? You have the right attitude. So tell me, how do I get started? And by the way, who is this Jehovah? It would take many months before I would see loved ones again. In fact, by the time my daughter Sydney came back, I didn't have gray hair anymore. She had died as a result of lung cancer due to smoking. She passed away at 28 when I was 58. My wife Martha did not come back, neither did Danny and Michael, my 2 sons, my only other 2 children. We sat and cried over our misfortunes. Sydney had very difficult times dealing with her mother and brothers not coming back. But you and I were given a second chance, I said to her. It's hard to say why God even let us come back, but I'm determined to make it. What I can tell you is that toward the last days of my life, Martha and the boys never came to see me. When I needed them, they were not there. I was always the last to be fed and the first one to bed. Even the nurses didn't want to be around me. But then nursing homes were like that. The elderly were merely shoved aside and forgotten. We were their mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, neighbors, and friends. We became the blemishes of society. At the end of those days, no one visited us anymore. So maybe God decided to forget those who forgot their loved ones. One day, we sat down with another resurrected person who had outlived me by several years. He died in the early part of what we call the Great Tribulation. Sydney and I were curious what led up to that. As it turned out, every country began interfering in the political affairs of their governments, openly picketing and inciting riot on officials. Country after country had to start putting its foot down, in some cases even tearing down the buildings themselves to make their point. There were groups of religious fanatics who took the law into their own hands, which the governments ordered executions for them. Eventually, religion was taken as a serious threat to all mankind, any religion. So as a part of its stand against religion, the governments all made laws that outlawed any form of religion. The man who told us this still had fresh memories of it. When I asked him about the nursing home I lived in, he told me that it was mysteriously burned to the ground. Then I remembered. That's how I died. I had died in that very fire. 2 young boys set it on fire, they said, told John Peppermill. They never got caught? Nope. Guess the police didn't care enough. 2 young boys. My boys were really older men with families. None of their families came back either. But when John said 2 young boys, I thought of Danny and Michael all over again. It was as if they struck the match right alongside the hoodlums who actually did the job. Either one of them could have taken me in, but no, they didn't love me enough, and now they died and still stayed dead. George told me that one day I'll forget them. Although that's impossible, after a few hundred years I might have even remembered that I hadn't even had sons at all. Right now, that seems hard to fathom, but I'll be glad when I can forget. Even today, I went through my activities without once thinking about them. There's a peace of mind to that. Maybe forgetting will be the greatest blessing I will have. About 100 years went by from this time. More of my kinfolks did come back. After a while, I wondered why I was so worried about getting to know my family. But I learned one thing. If I wanted facts and details, I needed to ask within the first few weeks. Once they started honing in on the requirements for living in the new order, they quickly forgot the life they used to have. I think the best part of getting to know them was how we all were related to one another, how close and intricate the human family really is. No matter how remote or how far away, each human is intertwined with the life experiences of every other human. If humans could have realized how critical that fact is, human society may have not had to experience an Armageddon. I began to realize with some certainty that even as early as a few months after their resurrections, some people already had made up their minds what life course they were choosing. Some went so far as to decide outright that they had no intention of complying. Such ones turned into piles of dust. I thought maybe God would make them grow old and die, but no, Jehovah God in an instant turned them to powder the size of a small anthill. There was never a body to memorialize, grieve over, or bury. During that time, there was a bunch of thrill seekers who wanted to test the limits of the law. And it was always among these new ones. One such group would not study the laws at all or latch onto a survivor, that is, one who survived Armageddon. They were convinced that they had come back to life just to have a good time. This local group of men and women numbered about 20. Many times did I and others try to warn them. Their youthful looks and near-perfect bodies were mere stumbling blocks. One of these, named Kroner, decided to lay down with a woman, and the moment he touched the woman, he turned to dust. That was something all of the new ones were told, that resurrected persons were not permitted to marry or procreate or have relations. These ones knew that. But worse was, Kroner had to imagine that he still had a libido, for God never gave them one in the resurrection. At some point, even the survivors no longer had sex, for sex was only intended for procreation, and there was no more children born past a certain point. Well, others looked on in horror the moment Kroner turned to dust. Some got angry and used unutterable words, and they vanished too. Only one or two of that original group still live today. It took 35 years to learn the nuances of the new language. We still speak English to one another, but on Assembly Day we speak only Aramaic. I never thought I would ever need to use it in everyday speech. Not until one day I was talking with a friend who was from Japan, who came to me and we couldn't communicate. So immediately we conversed in Aramaic. George walked up while we were talking and told me afterward how impressed he was. Then he asked, "Would you like to teach Aramaic in other parts of the earth?" "But George, I only know English otherwise." "I'm not asking you to translate. I'm asking you to fine-tune. I understand that in some areas people are having a hard time speaking in Aramaic. They understand it, but they don't speak it well." "You want me to be an Aramaic speech teacher?" "Yes. I believe you'd make a fine one." "Can I think about this?" "Sure." I went home and told Sydney about the opportunity. She was elated, so I accepted the job and I was off to see the world. I said goodbye to the house I built with my own two hands and left. As the years lingered on, I began to see the world around me change. Resurrection stopped taking place 200 years before Christ's millennium ended. All of the General Assembly days began to focus on how to prepare for the final judgment period. Since there was no way to know how long it would last, the thinking of the instructors was that it could last possibly as long as a couple hundred years. Of course, we were all reminded of the passage from Revelation, which said that those who rebelled would number as the grains of sand. We knew that Jehovah God would allow enough time to fully test every individual's integrity completely. And since so great a number would join Satan against God, the odds were increasingly against us. After all, only a few million came through Armageddon. Billions came back. Potentially billions could die again. Of course, this time there would be no death, only dust. As I traveled, I tried to teach others Aramaic, but more importantly, I tried to warn people to take seriously their position before God. It was hard to convince some that the devil would even beat back. To these, Satan was already gone. I always stressed that Satan would tempt them with the same devices as before. Remember Adam, who turned from God over a piece of fruit? Satan wouldn't offer them anything new, only to reject God over having our own complete sovereignty away from God. I could almost tell which ones were listening. Most took their perfection for granted. For as we neared the end of the 1,000-year reign, we became perfect in mind and body. And finally, the day came, and a special General Assembly was held. All the great princes were there. We could hear them all by special communication links from every corner of the globe. Moses, Job, Abraham, David, John the Baptizer, as well as many survivors, all gave speeches, and they all announced the names of those who went to heaven. Silence fell upon the earth as its inhabitants heard the list. At the end of its reading, we all stood up and in triumphal song. At the end of that song, Abel, the world's first faithful man, announced, "The Christ has now ended his 1,000-year reign, has handed the kingdom back to his Father. We all now stand before the judgment seat of Jehovah God. No more do we need Jesus to intercede as mediator for us. No more will there be forgiveness of sin. No more will Jesus' sacrifice cover them over. For many of us who have faced death for proving faithful, we no doubt will come off victorious. But those who came back in the resurrection, who do not know the true God, or had not fought off the temptations of sin born out of knowledge, are destined to fare badly. Do not believe you have any idea of Satan's crafty acts. Only obey Jehovah God and keep his commandments, and do not give into selfishness. In that the prophecy foretold in Revelation will be fulfilled that the unworthy will come so far as to attack the holy city in numbers compared to the grains of sand. We, the holy princes, expect that we will not be treated with respect as we should. Know this, that the true God has already won Armageddon. He will not let the earth be ruined again. The paradise will remain despite any efforts to destroy it. Be obedient, stay faithful, and everlasting life will be your reward. May the God of heaven, Jehovah, guide you. Abel received a standing ovation, but no sooner his words were spoken, a stiff cold breeze swept across the land, and from among the people rose a man named Euthania, who took the podium and for close to an hour spoke his mind on all matters. Funny part is what he said made a lot of sense, but then what was he trying to do? Seduce us with logic to make us prejudice? When he was done, no one applauded, but then Euthania did not turn to dust either. 3 days later, 2 men sat down with me to complain over a few things. Jeff Thomas and Armelian had been close companions of mine for a while. Jeff was born 100 years into the New Order. Armelian had been resurrected only 300 years ago. The biggest complaint was that they hadn't been allowed to become princes. Jeff put it like this: I've been alive for 900 years. I'm not infected with hate and gross immorality other people have. I have only known God, goodness, and perfection. I never got sick or felt the pangs of sin, but yet none of us were appointed as princes. Armelian saw his situation this way. On the other hand, I know that what life was like in the old world. Even as an Assyrian, I never bowed down to other gods or went to war with other nations. I only heard about Jehovah and the grief on my family that he brought. I was too young to understand how my father died, for he was one of the 185,000 that one angel slayed for Jehoshaphat. Am I not blameless? Why can't I be a prince? I tried to explain. Princes were appointed within the first 200 years of the New Order. Those God resurrected during this time were assigned. After that, there were no more. Even among the survivors, there weren't many who were appointed. And here you are, both of you, wanting something that no one can ask for? Those appointed had to have had a lifelong record of service to Jehovah, exemplary and true worship, which cancels out you right away, Armelian. And Jeff, be thankful you never did know bad. You really are a babe to badness. You weren't old enough, Jeff, when appointments were made. What was done was already done. But I want to caution you. You both sound pretty selfish about now. To which both of them denied it. Let's get your thinking back on track, okay? Both agreed. But thanks for coming to me. Then Jeff asked, but Henry, you've been around the world and back again. Don't you think you should be put in a higher position for all that good work you did? Not once did you turn away or give in. Doesn't that deserve something? I immediately said, Jeff, God has given to me all that he can offer. What else could I ask for? Satisfied with that answer, they went away. But as for me, the question kept coming up in my mind that Jeff asked me. As a matter of fact, his question began to bother me. I kept thinking, don't I deserve something more? Several weeks went by and Sydney came to me crying. For the first time in hundreds of years, she was missing Tom, her old boyfriend. Why in the world would you remember him? She told me, because I have no arms to hold me and no hands to caress me. And right now I need them. Sydney, for hundreds of years you've gotten along just fine. Why think about that now? Oh, Daddy, I miss him so much. And she gave way to tears. And what would you do if he came back? Neither one of you could have sex. No one can, not even survivors. She just went off and cried. Then I began thinking of Martha and the boys and how unhappy I was over not seeing them again. Why was I so unhappy? None of the three of them loved me enough to come and see me at the nursing home. But wait, those complaints and those thoughts were precisely from the devil. He can't really read our minds or our hearts, but he can put things there and twist them into wrong thinking. I began to realize what was going on. This is how the devil operates. He interjects the wrong thoughts, knowing that the majority of mankind is selfish. Most people let it play on their minds until they get what they want. I began to understand how to resist the temptations of selfishness. One day I came home and the house was filled with an unfamiliar scent of food. I recognized, but I couldn't quite place where I last smelled it. Fried chicken. It was the smell of fried chicken. Sydney came to greet me with a big, huge smile. I remembered how to fix it, Daddy. Doesn't it smell wonderful? Daughter, what have you done? Has not the law of the land about consuming animal meat mean anything to you? I began to weep bitterly over Sidney's complete disregard for God and his law. I also wept because I could remember how much I loved fried chicken before, and I wanted some now. I knew I had what I had to do with it to keep my standing with God. But how do I save Sidney from her own selfishness? Sidney became angered at my tears. You don't really love me. Sidney, you don't know the moment the meat touches your mouth, you're going to turn to dust. Don't test God. Well, it won't happen. I watched people yesterday eating it, and they turned out just fine. Then it is a test for you. During this period of testing, maybe Jehovah wants to see how loyal you are. Will you join the rebels, or will you remain faithful? Just as the thrill seekers lost their lives, so you will too. So he's letting them stay a little while longer. Observe carefully and do not stumble. They will soon be gone. And so I went into the kitchen, lifted the lid, and the pleasure of the chicken came back to me. No, I wouldn't even taste it, for a taste would turn to a bite into a meal. I love God more than my passion. I didn't let Sidney come with me for fear she might remember the place and return to it and really eat it. Then I took my pick, my shovel, and I dug a hole 3 feet deep and buried it. My act didn't go unnoticed, though, for 3 men and 1 woman saw me as I was finishing the covering up. They figured what I had done, and I had done something they didn't like. The woman aggressively pushed against me and asked, "What's in the hole, Hank?" I hated people calling me that as far back as a child, but I was determined not to answer her the way she wanted me to. Just a matter of waste, Artania. What kind of waste, Hank? Some leftover food. Why did you bury it so deep? Asked Corian. Just returning it to the soil. We wouldn't be a little selfish, would we? Complained Brian. No, Brian, I'm not being selfish. It was not fit for eating. What kind of food was it? Asked Molerin. Why should that matter? I entreated. Because it smells like chicken, and we want some, said Artenia. The group pressed in on me from all sides. They got close. They started kicking and slapping and punching me. One of them took the shovel I used to bury the chicken and hit me in the head with it. When I woke up from the unconsciousness, the 4 of them were eating the chicken, dirt and all. But as I sat there watching them eat, maggots came out of the ground and began crawling all over them. Then ants seeming from everywhere in the bowels of the earth started biting them. As I sat and watched, insects from the earth consumed them entirely. They didn't even have time to scream. When finished, the insects went back to the earth, and there was nothing left of them. No one else saw it happen either, but me. I wasn't sure anyone would believe me, so I kept silent. I didn't even tell Sidney. One day, though, Sidney was getting on my nerves over the whole matter, and I blurted out, "Then you'll have to see it for yourself." So I took her by the arm, and as we walked along, I told her about the incident. When we got to the site, we observed that the ground was particularly barren right there at that spot where they had dug it up. My shovel still was tainted with blood as it was standing up out of the ground. When Sidney saw the blood on the shovel and felt the bump on my head, then she knew I was telling her the truth. "Oh, Father, I'm so sorry," she cried as she hugged my neck. "Why, oh, why didn't I listen to you?" About that moment, George, the survivor whose house I had first stayed in, came up to Sidney and me. In a forward-speaking voice, he said, "Jehovah has observed your works. You have unusually strong faith. You have saved both your daughter and yourself. No harm will come to you anymore. You are chosen to be a special servant, and you will get to know many things." Chapter 2. Back to reality. I awoke in my drab-looking antiseptic bedroom in the Sunshine Estates nursing home. There was no fire that had consumed me, and there was Cecile feeding me my lunch. I would not have minded the chopped-up mush-like confection prepared for me, even served cold, had not the dream been so real to me. As she fed me, tears streamed down my face. I don't believe she even cared that I was crying. When she finished with me, she didn't even stay to talk. A half hour later, she came back and cleaned me up, sat me on the pot, leaving me there for about 10 minutes. Then she got me into a cold chair where I was to sit in front of the television for 2 or 3 hours. I sat there and looked at the faces of my companions in what they call a solarium. I tried to imagine what some of them might have looked like in their younger days. There was Helene, as beautiful in my dream as she ever was. She was always telling me things. Next was George, always made of sterner stuff, so he said. Beside him was William Hawthorne, who loved children, though he never actually had any. Next to him was John Peppermill, who always talked about burning this old nursing home down. Then there was Old Man Kroner, who just had to have a woman or bust. He could hardly hold his head up, let alone have a woman. The evening came on, and my night nurse, Artania, came in to put me to bed. "Hi, Hank! I see no one put you back to bed again." So she called Corian, Brian, and Malaran, 3 flunky volunteers, to help put me back to bed. One grabbed each limb and tossed me really hard in that bed. I cried out, and Artania slapped me for crying out. "How many times have I told you, old man, to keep your mouth shut?" So I persuaded her to lower her ear. "Do you like chicken?" I asked. "Why, yes, I love it." "Good," I said. When they left the room, I turned on my light, as I'd been doing every night, and reading this brochure I found called "Look, I'm Making All Things New." I couldn't tell you where it came from, except that it was on the counter at the nurse's station. I took it, and I read it, and I was now on my 5th or 6th time reading it. It brought so much comfort. There were animals at peace and plenty of food. No one was sick, and all of this would soon happen. There was no other magazine quite like it. No other magazine had captured so much of my attention. It was exactly the type of life I wanted. So I went to sleep that night, hoping to go back to that place in my dream. Instead, I dreamed I was in a fire. The flames were shooting higher and higher until they covered the sky. I woke up yelling, and Artania came in and started slapping me again. Finally, I felt myself pass out. The next morning, I woke up, and Cecile entered my room. Here she found the charred remains of my Paradise magazine in the wastebasket. How cruel of Artania! When she showed me the magazine, I just cried out, "Isn't it enough that she hits me?" Now, Henry, there isn't a mark on you. You complain and the physical doesn't show anything. And what do you call burning a magazine? That's a sign of a crazy woman. She's dangerous. I took an asthma attack right then and there. Cecile turned on my oxygen. Now, Henry, you've got yourself all worked up. Then she went out of the room and came back with my tray. Again, I was crying, and she never looked at me in the face at all. When she finished with me, she turned and said, "Well, if it's any consolation, Henry, she can't burn all the magazines in the nursing home." For the next couple of days, Cecile brought me different magazines on various subjects. She didn't realize the value I had placed on that Paradise magazine. Artania let them pile up on my nightstand. She had known how much that one particular one meant to me. I had to admire Cecile for trying to make me as comfortable as possible. The Paradise dreams came back after several nights, but definitely not as vivid. Still, there were the animals that were tame, the world so lovely. My flesh was young again. My vigor was youthful. There were no bad words, no cruelty. It made the pain less when I woke up. Memoirs of the New Henry, a narrative by Robert James Yates, Side 2. To my surprise, Martha came to see me one Saturday afternoon, but I was so overwhelmed that I couldn't stop crying. Cecile unkindly spoke out, "Don't let it bother you, he does that a lot." I went into a very depressed frame of mind. So Martha looked at me, and for a moment I could see that girlish face that I had fallen in love with just a half-century ago. But even that disappeared when Martha gave me a disapproving expression. "It's your own fault, Henry. You brought this on yourself." "Look at me." As she turned away, I said, "Look at me. What is it, Henry? She wouldn't even glance back. You have to take me home before they kill me. There you go again, Henry, always complaining. Look at my face. There is a bruise on my cheek. Oh, Henry, have you fallen again? As she turned to examine me. It was no accident. Now, Henry, you know that it is how you wound up here, always falling down, and you know you kept dropping things. And Henry, you know I'm 74 years old and I can't wait on you like I used to do. I had to listen to this prattle for close to 20 minutes. I was too glad to see her to complain over this nagging. I knew that all too soon she'd be leaving again, and I might not hear her voice again. Then I would miss her just the same. When she seemed to get tired of talking, I reached out. I held onto her hand. Then she began to cry. They took our house, Henry. Who did? The government. I couldn't keep up the taxes. I didn't know what to do. Is that why you haven't come? I didn't know how to tell you. Where are you living now? They call it a retirement village. It's a death trap, if you ask me. So even if I wanted to come home, there's no home to come to. Henry, I'm sorry. No wonder she didn't listen to my complaints. Her life was falling apart in the world outside. All this time, I wasn't believing she didn't love me. She hugged me, and we cried together. Finally, some tall man walked up to her and put his hand on my wife's shoulder. It's time to go, Miss Hellman. Well, Henry, she said as she dried her eyes in a hurry, I've got to go. This nice man is from the retirement village. She gave me one last kiss on the cheek and hurried along. The man escorted her, holding onto her forearm like a police officer might treat a criminal. And all this time, where were our sons? Martha never got to say. I kept wondering if they would have taken us in if they had known how badly we were being treated. I was no longer unhappy with myself, though. I made peace with God that very evening. And when I lied down, and if Artania came in to abuse me, I'd just take it with gladness. Oddly enough, that night she left me alone. I no longer felt hatred for her either. That night, I went to sleep in beautiful slumber. And when I woke up, I realized I didn't need the brochure on the paradise to help me visualize the future. But still, I missed its words of comfort that far exceeded its beautiful pictures. I could even imagine myself, what I could do in the new order. I'd make a big piano. I'd learned to play it so well I could compose symphonies greater than any of the greatest composers ever did. I would climb the highest tree. I'd grow the biggest tomato. I'd explore the deepest cave. I'd build a house big enough for 20 people. And I would always love my Martha until the end of time. Chapter 3, To the Future. One day, not long after this, I was having an especially bad day. No one could have known how bad my chest was hurting. All the nurses called me a baby. They were so demeaning as possible that day. When I asked to see a doctor, Lucille just shrugged it off. Finally, my lungs felt like someone had put them in a paper bag and tied the top. I knew I was dying. I tried to catch myself as I plummeted to the floor. I must have laid there for hours. My last thoughts were of my sons. Memories rolled around in my head of a car crash when they were with me some years ago. They were not even paying attention when the impact took place. So I imagined I got to say to them, "Why didn't you come to see me? Why?" Everything went black. "Rise up, Henry," a deep voice spoke. I opened my eyes. To my surprise, why, there was Martha, and she was smiling at me. "Henry, you've come back to me." "Thank you, Jehovah. Thank you." And she kissed me on the cheek tenderly. "Martha, how do you know Jehovah?" as I hugged her. "Why, Henry, that's the first teaching of the new order, that Jehovah is the supreme being of all the universe." "The new order?" "Yes, Henry." "This is not a dream?" "No, Henry." And I got up from the grass in which I lay, and there was no large crowd around me to applaud me as in the dream I had. "Where is everybody?" "Well, I don't know what everyone you have in mind, but breakfast awaits us in our new house." "Our new house? Did you build it for me already?" "Oh, Henry, you're so funny. I've only been around for just a few weeks, but it is our new home we're going to. It seems someone planned it just for us just a little while ago." "Who?" "That's the surprise." So I got up and discovered that Martha had already covered me with a robe. Well, I bound myself up with it and walked alongside her up to a large house situated on a hill. As we arrived at the grassy knoll about 100 yards from the entrance, I turned my back to the house to look over the beautiful landscape. There were houses everywhere, nicely separated by 2 or 3 acres or more from all sides. Yet it seemed as though we almost lived in a forest setting, for no one took the trees down. No barren meadows did we see. We had finally learned to live among the animals. This time, the Ohio River was not in sight. But I assumed I was still in Cincinnati, since it had always been my home. But I tried to see into the scenery what might have stood there. I no longer could imagine it, but to my amazement there were roads leading everywhere, nicely graveled, beautifully ornated. There were rows of shrubs on both sides, and they were accented with a variety of mums. "Henry, have you noticed anything about yourself?" "You mean that I'm walking?" "My dear, when you told me we were in the new order, I knew Jehovah had fixed me up. What else would a God of love do?" "Henry, I never knew you already knew about Jehovah. Did you study with Jehovah's Witnesses in that nursing home?" "Who?" "Then, Henry, how did you know about Jehovah in the new order?" "I read a brochure called 'Look, I'm Making All Things New.' It explained what the Bible said would happen at the end of this that old system of things, and what would happen in the new order." "I have one of those, and you'll get one too. They give those out at the meetings." "But I had one of those in the nursing home." I walked in, and 2 young men stood up in the middle of the room, and I knew who they were right away. Tears welled up in my face, and I ran over to them and kissed them and hugged them. I kept crying, my boys, you're alive." Martha said, "Henry, these are your builders." "Then you boys must have lived through Armageddon." "Yes, sir," Danny said. "We became Jehovah's Witnesses several months after Mom died," Michael explained. "What's a Jehovah's Witness?" Danny explained. "They were the only religion that stood up for Jehovah, a witness to the true God. Other religions just didn't make it." In anger, I spoke out, "I can't believe any religion made it. None of them ever helped anyone." "But Father, that's how we came to be here and to live through Armageddon. Only worshipers of the true God, Jehovah, survived." "Weren't they the people who bounced from house to house, pillar to post, up and down the street at all hours of the day and night, waking people up out of their beds, pestering folks from their dinner tables, and making a nuisance of themselves?" "Yes. And thanks to persistent witnesses, we listened. I'm alive because someone called on me enough. Dad, you would not have me right now if it weren't for them helping me." Danny began to cry. Then I remembered all too well in my dream how I felt when I learned Danny and Michael had not been back. In my dream, I was mad at God for making me live my life through all eternity without them. Yet here they were, in the flesh. I could not deny that, and had they not been truthful, God might have not let them live right then. "Well, son, I have to admit you are here. It seems reasonable that someone had to be the right religion." And I gave Danny a great big hug. because I loved him, and I began to realize how real this was. All the factors were there that were not in my dream, and there were some more surprises too, for there were far more issues at stake I didn't know. As we settled down to breakfast, I noticed electricity and plumbing were well advanced. There were light sensors instead of on and off switches on knobs, so when I washed my hands, for example, I merely put my hands under the tap, water automatically came out, first with soap, and then it cleared up after a couple of seconds. As I walked out of the bathroom, the light automatically went off. "Do you have a newspaper?" I asked Michael. "Yes, I do." And he handed it to me. The banner at the top of the page was, "Resurrection's up 10%. The paper was called the Watchtower Daily. Watchtower! That's their magazine, isn't it? Yes, sir. And true to my dream, there wasn't an ounce of meat on my plate. So I bugged him a little. I said, "So what happened to the bacon and eggs?" "Father," explained Michael, "we no longer kill animals for food." "Eggs ain't no animal." "Well, yes it is. It's an unborn chick." Around the table with us was Danny and Michael's wives. Michael's wife, Darla, I knew. I attended their wedding, but I didn't know Danny's wife at all. I knew that I would find out soon enough what happened to Warren, James, and Lisa's mother, Rachel. So Danny said a prayer over breakfast and we ate. So I asked Danny after the meal to introduce me to her. His wife's name was Alma. With her, he had 5 other children, but Rachel and her 3 all died in Armageddon. Rachel was against Danny becoming a witness, and the kids sided with her. Mike and Darla's children gave them a difficult time about being witnesses, but eventually Susan and Tommy listened. They live elsewhere now. That was good news. The bad news was that Sammy and Frida died in Armageddon, but Mike and Darla had 3 other kids later on. Finally, I asked about my dear Sydney. However, something was wrong about asking about her, but I couldn't understand why. No one even wanted to talk about it. Even saying her name made the boys look so depressed. "Well, did she come back?" I insisted. Darla looked over at me with a very accusing eye, and I was frozen with fear. Michael merely replied, "I can't talk about this now. I'm not ready." None of them spoke about it again that day. I didn't know if my sons just wanted this issue to pass, but I really needed to know what happened to Sydney. I felt funny that talking about Rachel was okay, but Sydney wasn't okay. So a couple of days later, I brought it up to Martha. "Do you know what happened to Sydney?" "This is one problem I can't help you with, Henry. I think you'll have to talk with Danny or Michael when you're alone with them." "Just answer me this, please. Did she come back or not? Yes or no?" "Henry?" Then she stopped herself. "No. I'm not going to talk about it now. Nope, it's not my place." "What is it with everyone?" I begged as she left me to myself. So, okay, I took her advice. I waited till I found Danny alone. He was working on some gadget. What it was, I still don't know. So I sat down and I offered to help, which he kindly welcomed. So, as we tinkered, we talked. Mom told me she suggested we should be alone to talk about Sydney. I was hoping you would find me here. I was surprised that he even admitted that. "So, do you know what happened?" "You mean to Sydney?" "Yes." "No, but you do." "What do you mean by that comment?" "Dad, I was there when Sydney died. I wasn't there when Sydney died, but you were." "Okay, but I still don't understand." "Look, all I know is Sydney died of lung cancer, right?" "Right." "How did she get it?" "By smoking." "And did she ever quit smoking?" "No, of course not. Once the harm was done, what difference did it make?" "Did she continue to smoke even up to and including the day she died?" "Yes, she died with a cigarette in her hand." "Precisely." I said, "Precisely what?" He said, "She showed an avid disregard for the sanctity of life. She displayed no remorse over her entire life course. She made no effort to correct her thinking or her actions." And I said, "So what?" And he said, "So she's already been judged." And I said with remorse, "She's not coming back?" "No." "How can you be sure?" He looked with a puzzled look. "I knew you were going to ask me that." I haven't quite figured out how to answer your question. I played this conversation out in my mind yesterday, and I reached an impasse and could not go any farther. I said to him, you need to know that I have faith in Jehovah. You need not fear to answer me. Then Danny hugged me around the neck. Then he exclaimed, I love you, Daddy. I said, I love you too, son. Then he went on to explain, what I'm about to say to you will require a leap of faith. I absolutely know Sydney isn't coming back. I don't mean that I concluded, I mean I know. He took a deep breath and said, I am an appointed prince under Jesus' direction. It was already revealed to me several months ago that Sydney would not be back, but that you and Mom would be coming back. I was directed to prepare a place for you and Mom, so I knew Sydney will not be back. The dream had not prepared me for this. I didn't know what to say. It never occurred to me that someone might not get to come back if they were unwilling to change. I figured that everyone, regardless of their past, came back. When I read that brochure, the first thing that came to my mind was getting to see Sydney again. I'd grieved for her so deeply, and I couldn't stand her being gone. Now she really was gone for good. It was almost too hard to bear. This was the moment reality set in. No longer was this a dream. I know she was your favorite, Daddy, Danny continued, and I have to admit I had a hard time with it. But Michael is having the worst time of all. Mike had put so much emphasis on who he would get to see or not see in the new order, who was coming into, as he was coming to the truth, that he rested his entire hope on that misgiving. Misgiving? Misgiving! Is that what Sydney was to you? A misgiving? Dad, I didn't say. And for your information, I too started believing this way based on the hope of seeing my daughter again. That's it, isn't it, Dad? Your daughter, your Sydney. Well, she was my sister, and I loved her with all my heart. But you made us hate her. What? That's right. Because Michael and I were not girls, you hated us, and we hated her right back. When she died, we were glad. And I slapped him hard. That's a fine way for a prince to talk. But I never said I was still glad. And he gave way to much weeping. For 3 nights I cried myself to sleep. Here I had lost a wife and 3 children. Now I had to face losing my one and only sister. I got up from my seat and put the things down that were in my hands. I turned my back to him and looked out the doorway. For a moment I thought of the chicken test and how Sydney hadn't passed the test without my help. So I kind of chuckled to myself at the thought of it. Danny heard me. Okay, what's so funny? Chicken. Okay. No, really. Good old homemade fried chicken just sizzling deep with deep basted barbecue sauce. Believe me, Dad, you lost me. Can't you just smell it, son? I've been away from meat so long I can't even picture it in my mind. And I explained. I had a dream about 2 weeks before I died. In it, Sydney was resurrected, but you boys had not been. Sydney got to the final judgment period and almost lost her life for wanting to eat fried chicken. I kept asking her why she wanted something she had learned to live without. It really is that simple, isn't it? Simple? Sure. Though it will take time, just like in the case of fried chicken, we learn to live without Sydney. The more we learn in this new order, the less we need all the clutter of memories that serves us no purpose. Right now, I can see Sydney at 10, getting braces in her teeth, her first dance at 14, moving out at 21. I still remember that funny smile, the way she used to laugh. Did I love her more than I loved you boys? I guess I did. Her dancing eyes, her warm embrace, her teasing fingers. We had talked, Sydney and I, Danny said, about the future. She was a friend, not just a sister. Michael came up from behind us and interrupted. But she's dead, and she's gone for good. There is no use in grieving now. God wouldn't like us to do that. Danny spoke out, "But that's why Jesus revealed it to me, so we can make peace with it and move on. We'll never resolve it if we never face it, and Jehovah understands that." I walked over to Danny and rubbed a tear from the cheek I had struck. "I'm so sorry." And I hugged him around the neck. Michael came over and made it a group hug. We must have cried for several minutes. The healing process now could begin. When we sat down together, I asked, "How much of this does your mother know?" Michael said, "Everything." "Then why couldn't she tell me?" I asked. He said, "Because she knew she couldn't explain everything completely, and we didn't know how you would receive the news," Michael answered. "Oh, I see." So it was important to know how your state of mind was. We still aren't sure we've done the right thing. You could still reject what we said, Danny said. I said, "I have to admit I'm having trouble sorting things out right now. It will take some time." Michael then said, "You sure surprised us the way you accepted so many things, though. Had it be difficult to hear that no meat of any kind could be consumed, or that you and Mom couldn't live together." "Well, I have to admit you figured out an interesting way to make a split-level ranch house to make two dwellings, but I already knew your mother and I were no longer married and that we would never get married again or procreate. But we always will be close friends forever, and that's enough for me." Life in the New Order began for me that day. It was better than the dream I'd ever had. The sky was bluer, the flowers brighter, the weather milder, but more than just that, some utopian philosophy that we learned from the old world. This world did not become entirely a paradise right away. It was difficult to get used to making everything by hand. I hadn't had to work like that in quite a few years before my death. With muscles stiff and chest tight, I often worked under considerable strain. As I kept on working on the land, helping others build their own houses and doing everyday functions, I often felt myself out of breath. But as time passed quickly, I knew I was progressively regenerating into the youth I would once become. Every morning I got up, and I could feel my muscles getting more solid. All of my hair grew back and darkened each week. My chin became firm again, and Martha, what a beauty she became. She never looked so pretty. She came to be slimmer, firmer, and well-proportioned. Soon I couldn't even imagine the thick-rimmed glasses she used to wear or that hearing aid she used to have. So one day, Martha came to me. Actually, she seemed kind of sad. Yet, there was some peace about her. But there was a look in her eyes I hadn't seen before. "Henry, I knew this day would come. It is time for me to go." "Go where?" "I'm leaving, Henry. I'm going to help new ones in Europe. It's a good chance I may choose to stay there." "But why?" "I requested an assignment there." "Did I do anything wrong?" "No, dear, sweet Henry. But you don't need me anymore. You've made all the necessary adjustments. It's time for me to move on. Now it's time for you to draw upon your relationship with Jehovah and realize you're never alone. When I was here, you could fall back on my advice and the advice of a wife and confidant. Well, no longer should we have that kind of relationship or a bond since we don't really have a marriage anymore. We will always be friends, though. Love will never be forgotten. Unlike the dead, love is alive and is remembered. I need to seek out my own potential and to let God's Spirit give me the direction we need to live. And we will see each other again. So remember, when forever's ahead of us, our paths must meet again. You won't have to remember the good times of the past, but the life forever in the future. What do I do with your half of the house? Give the whole house to someone else and build yourself another one. One your own personal design and taste. And Henry, would you do one more thing for me? And I said, "What's that?" She says, "Don't forget to pick up your socks when you're done with them." With that, we hugged and said our goodbyes. It took several days, when the tears cleared up, to realize she was absolutely right. Here I was, drowning in self-pity and my aloneness. And for a while after that, I slowed down my pace. After years of companionship, I had to learn to cope without her. I had to ponder over what she said about having my own relationship with Jehovah God without her in it. What did I conclude? That at the moment, I had not drawn close enough. So I moved out of that old house. I gave it to my sons to help find a new owner. Then I left Cincinnati altogether and I moved to the Pacific Coast. Before coming to Cincinnati at 14, I had lived at Puget Sound. There I returned to the salmon, the whales, the rainy seasons and the harbors, the lakes, the rivers that flow into the sea. It was like being 10 all over again. The stirring sea mist and the seagulls flying overhead and the rocky cliffs overlooking the sound were just as I had remembered them, except, of course, there was no Olympia, no Seattle, no colleges, universities that I had always dreamed of entering. In a way, I began to feel my age. I decided to withdraw for a while from people. I really didn't find out about local meetings for several weeks. The house I had built was slow. My heart just wasn't in it. This got the attention of some of the locals, too. One day, a man approached me and started to talk. He had a most interesting Irish brogue to his speech. "What might you be named, lad?" "Henry." "Well, Henry, I'm a Simon. Would you be in needing any help?" "I suppose I do." "Well, you don't have to suppose. If you do, you do. If you don't, you don't." "Simon, I don't know what I want. And I don't want your help at this moment, but I'll sure tell you when I do." My statement took Simon by surprise. He became flush. "I was sent to you by the local committee. You would do well to take my advice. Come to the meeting this eve, or you'll be paid a visit tomorrow." Then he pointed to where the local Kingdom Hall was, and I agreed to come. So I brought my study materials and sat down in the row farthest back. I mean farthest back. The meeting seemed to last forever, too. First, there was the usual discussion of the Bible text for the week. Then there was a reading of the portion of the new laws. There were demonstrations. Then followed after that by instructions from the newly resurrected ones. Then finally, 45 minutes were taken up with the new language. 5-minute talk at the end, completely in the new language. So there wasn't any sneaking out, though, after the meeting was over. The elders caught sight of me, and we sat down. I knew I wasn't going to get to hear a message of pity. One elder spoke up. "Why didn't you seek out the local Kingdom Hall?" And I commented, "I was seeking some time alone." He says, "Are you a recent arrival?" I said, "Yes, sir." "Were you a witness prior to your death?" "No." Suddenly they relaxed. "Oh, well then, Henry, we need to talk. One of the most important features of the new order is meeting together to be instructed. Due to the nature of our setup, these meetings mean the difference between life and death. They are not optional. You must come or you will not live to finish out Christ's millennium. Everything that happens to you will rest on your knowledge of what you are expected to do. How will you know unless you come?" The question seemed rhetorical, but the men really looked at me square in the eye when he said it, almost expecting an answer. Another man spoke up. "Henry, I want to tell you a story. It happened to someone I knew. Just before the Great Tribulation, many witnesses, particularly in America, had slacked off in meeting attendance. It was not unusual to see congregation meetings become half full. Those who attended on a regular basis, though, were busy in the preaching work. The young were busy knocking on the doors. The sick were writing letters, the elderly on the phone, and still others on the street corner. Well, Al Jones and I worked together one day, and he told me he needed to spend more time with his family. In fact, he was growing weary of service work. From 35 hours a month, he fell to just 6 hours a month, and he didn't attend the meetings after a while. Well, the Great Tribulation came, and the Kingdom Hall in our town was closed. We were given 24 hours to clear out our things, so we held an emergency meeting that very night before they boarded it up. Al didn't come to it, so during the meeting, we got together a schedule of all the attenders that they could write down. Because of security measures, we encoded locations and times. Only the people at that meeting knew where the next one was going to be held and how the code worked. One day I caught up with Al. I hadn't realized he didn't actually know the codes. And I couldn't just blurt them out at the time or the location on the street. There wasn't time for that. I yelled out to him, "A3," from across the street. We never got close enough to talk. He heard it because he yelled it back. But then he shrugged his shoulders and went into another direction. And that night he wasn't at the meeting, so unfortunately for him, that was the meeting where food parcels were passed out and medical supplies. Every time I saw him, I began to get an attitude about him because of his lack of meeting attendance. I kept giving him the code, but he would just never show up. One day he actually came to my door. His face was sunken from starvation. His clothes were torn. He began to beg me for food. I dare say the man was near death. I didn't have to let him in, but in fact we were told specifically not to do that. But I welcomed him into my home, and we finally sat down to talk while he actually ate my last meal. I could tell he was really sorry for not coming to the meeting, that he didn't know our codes. Once I had determined his goodwill toward the witnesses, I let him in on our codes. The first elder spoke up, and because this man took a chance on me, I'm alive today. But Bill Timmons didn't have to do that. I should have been attending the meeting all along. I too thought I could be alone, miss a meeting or two. Now is no less critical than then. You need to realize how serious that divine law really is. You have to attend. You must attend. Disobedience to it will result in loss of your life, and it can be damaging to the rest of us too. So please come, stay with us, but come to the meeting, all of them. Epilogue. So I've chosen to write down these memories before they are actually forgotten. And the time it has taken to just jot these few lines down, I have actually already forgotten that beautiful daughter who did not value her life enough to merit a second chance. Wait a minute. Sydney, that's her name. How happy I am to have Martha, Danny, and Michael back in my life. Funny how I canceled them out of my dream when in reality they're really here with me. I got a letter from Martha just the other day. She's in Sweden, and she says she loves it there. Naturally, I wrote her back that about the life here in the harbor. I thanked her in the letter for a beautiful marriage and a lifetime of absolute true love. But it was the hardest letter I had to write. Danny phoned me the other day. His eldest son was appointed a prince. Jacob is just like his father. Michael called yesterday and told me that Tommy got to meet Moses. That's right, Moses the other day. I can't even imagine the questions I'd love to ask Moses. According to Tommy, Moses was one of the first to be resurrected. Of course, that was no surprise. Tommy is busy helping the new arrivals. I was sad over being chewed out by the local elders, but what they said was absolutely correct. I remember back on that dream. It was so unrealistic. Every time I looked to the future, I always saw myself from a present point of view. Being in paradise doesn't mean freedom from struggle or from all forms of pain. I'm not always 100% happy all the time. Here lately, I find myself even being a little depressed sometimes. There were dark moments after my resurrection. I was resurrected to the same area of Cincinnati I knew well. I really never got to ask Danny and Michael why they never came to see me in the nursing home. I still don't know how I died, but I have had joys I never dreamed of. I climbed a tree just the other day. Imagine a grown man climbing a tree. And my house is actually built now. Enough for just me. Okay, one or two guests, but not the 20 members I thought of. And my garden has all kinds of vegetables and flowers. And oh yes, that tomato or two that might compete for the largest I've ever grown. And yes, that piano's underway too. But it'll take some time to build. And when it's done, I will make those keys ring with joy. What a beautiful life I have. I haven't missed a meeting since Al and Bill spoke with me. The wrinkles are now all gone. I have the musculature of a young man and the wisdom of an old man. I'm not old anymore. Never again. I was once old, but never again, not even if I live out eternity. I will now always be young. This can be your story. You too can live forever. Living forever, though, is not a mere concept. It's a reality. So take hold of it. Remember that Jehovah God is your maker. Worship him in spirit and in truth. Follow Jesus' example set while he lived here on this earth. He had to die to open the way for you and me to gain life. You do not have to die. Do not think too hard about the details of your future. All you can do is live each day as if it were your last. But yet keep Jehovah God first. Faith in God is what made me young, and it can do the same for you. If you remember Jehovah, he will remember you. Go right now to your kingdom hall and jot down the meeting times. Then go there. Be instructed. Remember, you'll be learning new laws and a new language. But don't worry. We are here to help you. Life is not a dream. You can't wish those problems away. Work with worshipers of Jehovah God, and we will help you. And may all your days be paradise.